So we're about to do a much more exhaustive comparison between the tools and items that you'll find in the mesh and edit mesh menus of Maya and their Blender equivalents, or nearest as can be anyway. But I'd just like to do a quick review of a few essential things to note, maybe some handy shortcuts and one or two problems that you might come across. I'll just start here. We'll just sort of run through these really quickly. Shouldn't take more than a couple of minutes. But if we just take a look at this object here, for example, we can see half of it's missing. This is because it's a very large object. So if you're working with something that is sort of quite mountainous in the background of a scene or something, it's worth noting that the clipping values of the 3D view camera, not the renderable camera, but this 3D view camera is set at 1000 here. We can see that we've got this properties sidebar here and the clipping values are in here, so we can increase that value to whatever we like really. This can go really, really high if you want. It's also worth noting with Control Alt and 0, if I just hit the Control Alt and 0 shortcut, we're going to snap the renderable camera to this location that we were viewing then. And as we can see here, the camera in its camera's properties, we can see the clipping plane is set really low. So if we just switch that to throw in a few more zeros there, so that should resolve that. So that's worth noting. Let's just jump to this cube that I've got selected here. I'd just like to give special mention to the fact that there are some really useful shortcut key menus that it's very handy to always have at your fingertips if necessary. We've got Control F, which is for faces. This is going to give us a faces related set of tools. Same with Control E for edges and Control V for vertices, so we can see those there. We've got Control Tab, which will bring us up the switch between the vertex, edge and faces. Selection types, we've got Control Shift and Tab. Here we've got our snap types, which we can quickly change down here as well. Finally, I'd just like to mention that what we could do is grab these two vertices here, and if you do happen to be just experimenting with what Blender can do and you find yourself creating an edge like this using the Make Edge / Face tool, which is a shortcut key F, we've obviously created an edge between those two vertices. Now you'd be forgiven for thinking that this face up here at the top would have been split and it would have created two new faces, but as we can see, it's just the one face there. In fact, if we just grab this edge and subdivide it and grab the vertex that was created in the middle of that subdivision there and move that up, we can see that literally it was simply an edge that was created and it didn't split the face at all. In fact, if I just demo on this other face here, what you would normally do if you actually did want to split the face at the same time as making the edge, that particular tool is called Vertex Connect, which is assigned to the shortcut key J, which would now create two independent faces either side of that newly created edge. So it is easy to obviously get into these sorts of problems, especially if you're coming from other applications, because other applications won't let you do that. It will probably throw you an error. It won't allow maybe a vertex in space like this or a couple of edges like that. So what we can do, incidentally, is come down to the select menu and go loose verts edges. In fact, let's just deselect everything first so it's a clean selection. Loose verts edges here, and problem aspects of the mesh in a sense have been selected. So now we can just delete these, only edges and faces. And there we go. So that's a much cleaner way of doing it. So that was probably a little bit longer than I was hoping, but that's just a very, very quick overview of some of the most handiest shortcuts and so on. But let's get stuck into the real meat and bones of it and get through this mesh and edit mesh menus and their Blender counterparts. Combine. Okay, so we've got these two cubes. cube 1 and cube 2. Let's just select this one and then shift select the next, press combine, and now we've got them into a single object called polysurface 1 now. Don't worry about this stuff, it's not really relevant. This is, for all intents and purposes, just now a single object. So let's go to Blender. Here we have 2 cubes again, 1 cube and 2 cube. Over here we've got cube and cube 001. So let's select one and then shift select the next, and then come down to here, object and join, or Control J is the shortcut. And now we've got them as just one single object. In fact, it's adopted the name of the last object I had selected. Separate will take a mesh and divide it into its various elements. That basically means any sections of geometry that aren't attached or welded to any other sections of geometry will essentially be split and divided from one another. Let's see what I'm talking about. Let's just press separate here, and there you go. We've got 2 separate objects now because these weren't attached or combined, attached or welded. This Maya will also parent them to another node, but don't worry about that. It's not important at this stage. In Blender, what we would do is we would need to be in edit mode, so tab into edit mode or switch it down here. Then what we can do is we can press P, and then this gives us a little separate menu, and what we would do then is by loose parts. And now we can see, if we tab back out into object mode, we've now got 2 separate objects again. Extract will do exactly the same thing as separate if we don't select any faces, but if we actually do select some faces, so maybe those 2 faces there, and select extract, what we get now is 2 separate objects, but based on the selection. So we've got this object here. Let's just move that out of the way so we can see a little clearer, and we've got this object here. Hopefully that's clear. Let's just go to Blender. The way we would do this is to be in edit mode, so tab into edit mode. Let's select these faces, and then press P. This is the separate menu, and then by selection, the first one. So now we can tab back into object mode again, and now we can see we have these 2 separate objects. Let's move that one out of the way, and there we go. Booleans. Let's take a look at the Boolean operation. Let's have a look at the difference. We've got in the scene here 2 separate objects, a cube and a sphere. In wireframe, that's what they look like. Basically, just created a sphere, moved it up a little bit in the cube. I'm just going to select the cube and then shift select the sphere, Booleans, and then difference. And now we can see that it's basically created a new object with that particular algorithm. In Blender, where this is, we've got the same sort of setup here, cube and a sphere, as you can see in wireframe there. This is a Boolean is a modifier in Blender. They're over here in the properties window. On the spanner icon here is object modifiers. We can select the pull down menu and select Boolean, and then from here we will choose the operation. As we can see, the 3 basic operations there, and we've got difference, and then select object sphere, and then we can see in wireframe mode what that's done. To be able to, what we'll need to do to finalize the command is to actually apply the modifier. So apply that, and then we can move this out of the way, and we can see that it's very similar to the other object that we had in Maya. Smooth will allow us to create extra geometry, but it will smooth the distance of the new vertices to the existing geometry. So like a little bit like this. The more times we run it by default in Maya, we could shift some of the options here in the, if I click on the option box, but let's just stick to the default. The more we do it in Maya, the more sphere-like it's going to get. That's essentially what the smooth is doing here. In Blender, what we can do is we can get into edit mode. We can highlight all the faces of this cube. We can press W to bring up the specials menu, and then we can subdivide smooth. And there's more options then. We can do the number of cuts and so on. Down here, we can actually increase this value here beyond 1. so we can get some different results, as you can see there. There's another way to do this, which is possibly more similar to the way that the Maya Smooth is operating, which is in the modifiers panel. We can go to add modifier and subdivision surface, and there we can see that we've got one subdivision at the moment. If we just crank this up a few times, you can see it starts to get more sphere-like. We can apply this then, and then now if we tab back into the geometry, we're where we would be if we were operating in Maya. Average vertices is going to try and do the same thing as the smooth operation, only without adding extra geometry. So a little bit like this. We can see the corner verts especially trying to average their distance between its surrounding geometry. That's at an object level, and we'll perform it on every vertex, but we can also do this to just the selected vertices, so a little bit like that, and we can see we're getting a little bit more of a smoother result with those vertices. In Blender, we can actually highlight all the vertices and go Control V and then smooth vertex, and that will essentially do the same thing. So I can repeat that command a few times with Shift R, so undo those. We could also do the same, but we just need to just select the vertices that we want the operation to be take effect on, if we only just want to do it to say a few. So let's try that. Now Control V, smooth vertex, and now Shift R to repeat that command a few times, and we can see we're getting a similar result as we did in Maya. Transfer attributes will allow us to copy certain mesh details from one object to a second object. Some of these options are vertex position, vertex normal, UV sets and color sets. So for example, we could highlight this object, select another object, and then select apply, and we can see that this second object takes on the general shape of the first object. This is also possible to do with these other types of attributes, obviously. With vertex position, vertex normal and color sets, this isn't actually possible within Blender. However, there is an add-on currently in development called Mesh Transfer, and that looks like it should be able to do the trick. So I'm going to try and link to that somewhere, because it doesn't actually come with Blender by default, so it does require a little bit of searching for. Anyway, the UV sets, however, are pretty straightforward to be able to copy across, so let's take a quick look at that. I've got two objects which are basically the same, but the UVs for this object's been rotated around. We can see I've got cube rotated and cube. If I'd basically just select this object, then select the next object, and then go Control L, this brings up our make links, and at the bottom here is join as UVs. If I just select that, now both objects will have the same UV set, which is in this case was the flatter layout. I'd just like to also draw attention to another add-on, which is called the Copy Attributes menu. So you can search for that. Check that on. What this can do is give us a few more attributes that we can actually copy across. So if we again shift select two objects and go Control C to bring up this menu, we can see that there's things like copy vertex weights here, for instance. What we can also do is go at a mesh level, so we can edit into this and now go, say, select this face and then that face, and now Control C, and we get these options here. So copy material, image, and UV chords. So if I just click that,
we can see it's stacked the UVs that were on the left side of the layout on top of these UVs that we can see here.
Coming down to the reduce option and clicking on the option box, this is essentially going to employ an algorithm in order to try and reduce the poly count of this particular object, in this case a sphere. If I just bring this down to 50%, and we can obviously employ certain things that we want it to do. So for example, we want to preserve best we can the UV borders and so on. But anyway, if we just keep it pretty simple, just press apply, and then there we go. It's pretty much preserved the overall shape, but it has reduced our poly count down to 374. Before it was 760, so that's pretty close.
So this reduction all works hand in hand with the Paint Reduce Weights tool that can be found below this tool in the Mesh menu. This allows us to specify areas of the mesh that we don't want it to reduce, or for example only by a small amount, say. But if you choose not to paint any weight into the reduction, then it'll just treat all these areas of the mesh equally as we've seen. Now in Blender, the reduction alternative is the Decimate modifier. And we can find that in our modifiers tab of the properties window, and we can see we've just got this these couple of objects here to help demonstrate this tool. This is the mesh primitive, the monkey head that we get from our add menu here. We can see that this option just down here. What I've actually done though is just subdivided it a couple of times. So to help us visualize the wireframe of this object a little bit better while we're in object mode, I'm just going to come over to the object tab of the properties window and then just select under the display section wire and draw all edges, and then we can see exactly how dense this mesh is now. And then if we just come back to the modifier, you can see that we've got these three different simplification modes to choose from. We've got the edge collapse method, which is just your most standard method of reduction. This is going to kind of heavily triangulate the mesh depending on how much we apply this ratio here. And then the next method is the unsubdivide, which will basically just reduce detail. This is best for geometry which has a lot of quads in it. So we can see this monkey head, for example, is mostly quads. There are some triangular areas, triangulated areas like down here and in the eye, and then in the corner of the ear, and then a couple of areas down here. We can see triangulation there and in there. So that it's not perfectly quadded, but it should give us some good examples of these algorithms anyway. And then finally, we've got this planar option, which is just going to reduce detail on forms comprised mainly of flat surfaces, which is actually very, very good for sort of mechanical surfaces or very boxy shapes. It's very easy, quick and easy to reduce the polygon count down to exactly what you need in those instances, but we'll just come to that in a moment as well. So with this first option, the edge collapse, I'm just going to reduce this ratio in half, so we should be able to half our polygon count of the object by just turning that to 0.5. And we can see not a lot is happening because we've not got the eye icon here. I must have just turned that off. So I'm just going to turn that back on. We can see it's heavily heavily triangulated the mesh. Now we can see down here we've got a face count 21,226, which if we just turn this off again, we can see it's actually 32. So that's kind of dropped it quite significantly there. And if we just drop that even further to 0.25, we can see it's going to start to heavily reduce what's there at the moment. So that makes an object quite quite difficult to work with if we're going to want to try and get in here and continue working away at this object. However, if you're just going to be using, say, a proportional editing tool, maybe it's not going to be that much of a difference, or perhaps the overall aim of this is just to reduce the polygon count, in which case mission accomplished. But in that case, we're obviously not going to be too concerned about the triangulation. So anyway, we've got these other options, the unsubdivide. So if we this works with iterations. So if we just turn this up by one iteration, we can see we're getting quite a smooth result, and it's just kind of maintaining a good polygonal flow across the object as we just sweep through these. And this has almost reduced it right down to the original mesh that we had. The problem areas, of course, are these triangulated areas that were just pointed out before. So that's that's basically the reason why, the best way that this option works is with a completely quadded mesh, but we get some great results with that nevertheless. And then we have the planar method, which is not going to work terribly well with this object because it's quite an organic shape. As you can see, that's the kind of result that we get. So moving on to this object here, again, I'm just going to come over to the display and then show our wireframe that we've got. So what I've done here is I've just subdivided a plane down the center with just using the Control-R shortcut key just to generate that one edge loop, and then I've just subdivided it a couple of times. But what I've done then is just taken the 3D cursor as its pivot point and just rotated this face down 45 degrees. So we know that this angle here is definitely 45 degrees. So if we just come to the Decimate modifier tab just drop that on there, and then come to our planar option. We can see that even with a low angle, in fact a low angle of 1 should reduce the polygons all on those faces there, but we can see that we've still maintained this edge that we did here. In fact, we'll maintain that all the way up to 44 degrees. As soon as we hit 45, it'll take that away. So that's basically what this angle limit is doing. So that's the basics of the algorithms that we can see there. One last thing I thought I'd do is just mention this collapse option has got this paint reduce weights equivalent that we saw in Maya. We can do essentially the equivalent in here. We're using this option here. We've got this area here where it says vertex group name, and this is obviously just with this collapse option. So what we can do is we can switch to our weight painting mode, and then just paint somewhere on the mesh, which I've already done. So I've just painted in these areas. I'm just going to make sure that we've got a weight value of 1, we've got a full strength, and then we've got a radius of brush that we're happy with, that we can set with the F shortcut key if we like. So I'm actually just going to drop that down to 0 now, and then just paint some of that back in, just so that it has no effect there. Or at least very little effect there, and then just do that to some of these areas as well. So that'll do. Just concentrate on this main eye area. For some reason we need that to be reduced heavily, so let's just do that. Let's just drop a lot of that as well. So let's turn ourselves back to the object mode and then switch to that group, and then we can see that not a lot's happening. So I'm just going to crunch this right down to 0.2. And we can see that only the eye is affected, and some of the other areas where it was very, very lightly painted. So what we can do is also just invert that if we like, so it will just preserve that area that we painted and everyone else will be reduced, which is all fairly straightforward. Just one other thing is just if we go over to the Object Data tab, we can see that this is where our vertex group is. We can rename it here, or we can remove it entirely. So like that's just now removed it, and we can see that we're getting an error message here, so we can just take that out. And that's basically the ins and outs of the reduce equivalent that we can find within Blender.
We can come down here to the cleanup. What this is allowing us to be able to select or try and fix certain types of faces and geometry depending on a certain criteria. So for example, edges with 0 length or non-manifold geometry and so on. In Blender we can kind of do this because we can come down to the select menu while in edit mode and select non-manifold there and then delete them if we want. Or we could select loose verts and edges. So this allows us to clean up in a sense. There is actually another add-on in development though, which is called Meshlint. This again isn't included in Blender by default, but again I'll try and link to it somewhere so you can take a look at it. It basically just gives us a better dialogue in which to maybe do some cleanup operations with, so that's probably the closest equivalent there. One of the more straightforward operations in Maya is the triangulate, which will do just that. And then quadrangulate will do essentially the reverse. In Blender, what we've got here is we can go Control F to bring up the faces menu, and then we've got triangulate faces, and we've also got tries to quads, which is a very basic equivalent. Fill hole. This is pretty straightforward. What this will allow us to do is essentially just create geometry where there are gaps in the mesh. So let's just try this, fill hole. That was at the object level, so it filled every hole it could see. In this case, it's just these two here. If I just undo that, we can actually go into the edge mode component and select that ring of edges there around the hole and then fill. And that will fill that, and same again here, so we can do the operations one at a time. This isn't obviously creating any more geometry, it's just creating one large n-gon, if you like, to essentially just fill that area. In Blender we can do the same kind of thing. Here's a similar object. If I just grab this edge loop here. What we can do is we can press F. That's the shortcut key. That's just F for fill, or make edge face is what it's called here. So let's just select this edge loop and just go mesh, edges, make edge face. But we can also see it on faces, make edge face. And so that's kind of a quite a straightforward command. That's how you would do it in Blender. The make hole tool is not a tool I've actually got that much experience with, to be honest. I don't actually know many other 3D artists that use it either. So apologies if I'm completely missing the concept of how useful this is, but I'll just give it a quick demo anyway. If I just initialize the tool, make hole tool, what we can do is we can select this face here. This is what we want we want our hole to be, and we're going to create geometry from this face to this face. And so if we now just press enter, we can see what's actually happened there. So it's created this sort of geometry leading between the two faces, but it's created a hole in the top. So there you go. As I say, I don't know too many people who use this, but there it is anyway. In Blender we could kind of do a similar kind of idea here. I have this similar cube with a plane hovering above it. Basically I've selected these two faces again, and what we could just do is go mesh, edges, and then bridge to edge loops, which we can see there. And now we can just press X for delete, and then just delete only faces, and it's essentially created the same kind of geometry, only perhaps a little bit cleaner. In any case, that's probably the closest comparison that Blender has for that particular tool. The Create Polygon tool is quite handy. What we can do here is essentially just initialize the tool there, click to place each vertex. To finish, press enter. Let's try that. So there we go. We just outline the shape of the polygon we want, and then when we're finished, press enter. Pretty straightforward. That was done in the top orthographic view, by the way. And then now we have this shape. So let's just take a little look around. There we go. In Blender, the best way we would do this, again, I'm in top orthographic view. Tab into the edit mode. I'm just going to grab that vertex, and that vertex. Just delete these first. And now I'm just left with that one vertex. This is going to be our starting point. I'm now just control left click to just generate a polygonal shape. I'm going to shift select the last vertex and then press F, and then that's going to fill the distance between those two verts with an edge. Then I'm going to highlight all with A and then press F to fill, and then we have a similar kind of polygonal shape. So here we are in the Sculpt Geometry tool. We can see this paintbrush icon here and the red circle to denote the radius of the brush. We can also see the Sculpt tool settings over here on the left. We've got these regular brushes here with the push, pull, smooth, relax, pinch and erase. We've got other parameters that we can tweak with the stroke and the stylus pressure and so on. To get the most out of it, we can just click and drag across the surface there, and we're pushing as we are in that tool. We can push the vertices into the mesh. Let's take a look at Blender's equivalents. If we come down to the object mode here, we can get the other modes that we can sculpt with here. We can see this is the fourth one down, and this opens up this tool shelf here. We've got all the various different and typical commands that you might find. If we go and click on this brush icon here, we get all the other icons, all the other access to all the other brushes. We've got we're on this brush at the moment. Let's just leave it there. We're on full strength. We can see the radius of this brush here with the red circle outline, and if we just drag across this sphere surface, we get it's essentially just pulling out those vertices. If I hold down Control while I'm clicking, while I'm left clicking, by the way, I'm actually pushing into the surface at the moment, and that pretty much is the basic equivalence of the sculpting. I will actually go through much more in detail with this whole tool, but for now that should serve as a brief introduction. Down here we have our mirroring options. If we can select mirror cut here, this will create a plane for which to slice the geometry along, and this can be now moved to dictate where that slice exactly lies, and we can see it's duplicated and mirrored brethren on the other side of this plane here. We can select this blue circle around the edge and initialize the rotate gizmo. This will allow us to further dictate where exactly that slice and mirrored axis is. We can undo these commands and just click on mirror geometry, which is just a straight ahead wholesale mirror of this piece of geometry here. We could then just delete the original. There are a few settings which can set the initial cutting plane there with the merge vertex threshold. Similar in the mirror geometry, we have the axes we want to be able to mirror along, and then we have the merge vertices there. In Blender, the way this would work is we can try the modifier. We've got a mirror modifier here. This gives us a whole host of options here, the typical axes and merge clipping options here, but we've also got a mirror object which will dictate exactly where we want that kind of slice plane to take effect. This doesn't work exactly in the same way that Maya does though, but that's basically where that is. We can also do this another way. We can go to the object menu here and go to mirror, and then we have the interactive mirror there, or the same basic settings here, but just for completeness we'll just select the interactive mirror. Control M is the shortcut, as I say, and then we can select X, Y or Z to dictate exactly which axis we want to choose, and then just press enter to complete that action.